So as for 2020, how that was a power grab was this was essentially the largest upwards transfer of wealth in modern history. All of the most powerful corporations and people used this moment to capitalize on and sort of suck up all the wealth that they can with their alleged insider trading and all of these kind of things. If I'm not mistaken, the statistic is that 60% of the small businesses that closed during that time stayed closed, while the biggest corporations in the world, fast food chains, Walmart, Amazon, all thrived and made billions more dollars and became more powerful than ever with their delivery of groceries and all of these things that we needed while we were staying inside of our house. Not to mention, there were very dark things that happened. If you look at what happened in China and other countries and how they went about controlling the people under the pretext of protecting them from the virus, China people got ripped and carried out of their homes even if they had a fever and basically put into camps with each other. In Australia, they were using drones for the first time to fly around and detect if people were outside of their houses. There were just a lot of control measures that were clamped down upon the people. That was a moment when we had experienced the most powerful having even more power than essentially they've ever had. What I didn't get the chance to say in my other video was that this happens every time that there's a Pluto-Saturn opposition as well as a conjunction. So it's like this cycle where when there's an opposition, there is a fight against power. Somehow that always ends up leading to the most powerful ending up with more power. So the last two conjunctions that happened between Saturn and Pluto before this one that happened in 2020 were in 1947 and 48, and then there was one in 1982. So the one that happened in 1947 was right after World War II, and the consolidation of power that happened in that one was kind of highlighted by two different things. The first was the legislation that created the CIA. And then the other thing was the Truman Doctrine. It must be the policy of the United States to free people who are resisting attempted subjugation. And how has the US freeing people really gone in places around the world? And then the more recent one happened in about 1982, 1983. So there was the Latin American debt crisis. Big theme of these times seems to be financial crisis. So the unemployment rate in Mexico was about 10%, and Poland wanted to stand in solidarity with them, but instead the Poland government imposed martial law so that the people could not stand in solidarity. So the most recent example of the opposition that I can think of is 9/11. So because 9/11 happened, there was the establishment of the TSA. And as we can see, they still have that power to this day. Those are the kind of things that happen. There have been a lot of astrologers that have mapped out sort of all of the different events that happen during these oppositions and then these conjunctions between Pluto-Saturn. One of the very best that does it is Rick Levine. If you look up Rick Levine's talk about Pluto-Saturn and the cycles, he has mapped it back, so far in the past, where he said exactly what has happened every single time. Some of my favorite examples, or I think that are the most prominent examples, are like the assassination of Julius Caesar, which was a fight against power, which essentially led to his family having more power than ever. And then the one that I think is the most telling of all is the Nika riots. So in the year 532, during the reign of Justinian, so all of these people, I believe it was like 30,000, were gathered in the Hippodrome of Constantinople, which was like this huge arena that was used for public gatherings and chariot races. So at the time, the people were divided sort of like they are now in the United States, in this way where, if I'm not mistaken, it was like the political parties, the sports teams, and the entertainers, like the musicians and things, were all sort of consolidated together. So if you were a fan of one, you were a fan of all of the different things. So the members from this side that were supporting one team and the members from this side that were supporting one team started getting super rowdy, and it created this entire chaos. And then what happened was, let's just say that the people in power locked the arena, and very, very dark things happened where they essentially capitalized upon that moment to... Honestly, it's something you should look up, because I think it's one of the most interesting things in history that happened with Saturn, Pluto, oppositions, and conjunctions. So 2020 was particularly crazy because it started out with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that was on January 12th, and then there was a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in the middle of the year. So Jupiter is expanse, and Pluto is this dark transformative control thing. So there was an expanse of the dark transformative control that started in the middle of the year, and we were all very surprised by the fact that everything was being controlled in such a way. And then the year ended off with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the winter solstice, which is what created the Christmas star. I don't know if you guys remember. They were so close together in declination that they both looked like one big star in the sky. So it was like hit after hit after hit, all in 1 year. So it was, like I said, probably the biggest thing we're ever going to see in our lifetime. I'm hoping that 2026 is not necessarily like that, but of course more events have been happening since then. We're in this big, great changeover type of period, and the finale is sort of 2026, and then there's little aftershocks like 2028. But I did know a little bit about the Black Death with the Jupiter-Saturn, and I also believe that Mars was involved with that one. The one that always comes to mind for me is 1914, Spanish influenza, Pluto-Saturn conjunction. And during that one, there was strict censorship of newspapers and mail and telegraphs, travel restrictions, state control over factories and raw materials, and just like expanding policies that were all happening. So yeah, whenever there's a breakout of a virus during a Pluto-Saturn conjunction, there seems to always be this consolidation of power. And of course, that's not necessarily a good or bad thing, you know? So maybe people are benefited by it, but there are dark things that happen as well. So I hope that sort of answers your question.